What's going on, Flow State community? I've got a very special guest for you, Jessica Page. Jessica, we met online, of course, because, there's no going outside the house these days. A week or two ago, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had just a basic connection call, and there were just a lot of similarities in the way that we approach business, in the way that we approach helping our clients build better businesses while still being like centered spiritual human beings. And I wanted to take an opportunity just to hear your story and how you got into your business. I know you come from an entrepreneurial background, which I love talking to people that came from like an entrepreneurial family. My grandparents were entrepreneurs, but like my mom and dad, not so much. So I'm like super fascinated in that too. Yeah, it skipped a generation. Yeah.
Well, I'm so honored to be here. And yeah, there's just so much synergy. And, I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like we first just dive in and we're willing to do whatever we've got to do at all costs, which normally leads to sacrificing and grinding it out. And then for me, that was very much the case for decades. And I'll share my whole story. But then it was like, okay, it gets to be easier. And I get to go through the spiritual realm. I get to do the deep inner work. And so really what I'm shifting in this paradigm is wherever you're at in your journey, it's like doing the deep, intimate inner work first, or creating that foundation, then going into the conscious business practices, right? Because you can be doing any system, but until like it's the fuel that's backing the system.
Right.
So if that's faulty and traumatized and, all those sorts of energies that us beings carry, then we're like working against ourselves. So yeah.
So with your clients, do you attract more people that are heavy in the entrepreneur kind of like grind side and that are seeking out more of like a centered way of living? Or are you working with people that are focused more on being centered and want to start a business?
A little bit of both. It's interesting. So early on it was the latter. And then really it's people who, like, my movement is really grind to glory. And I think grind means something different to everyone. And this was really like a dream interpretation for me. It was like a dream incubation. So I've been a lot of things. I've been a hairstylist. I've been a massage therapist. I've been a personal trainer. I know we share that in common.
Yeah.
I've been a fitness competitor, a gym owner. I owned a gym in New York. So big brick and mortar for 6 years before I really landed into my true passion, which of course is what I'm doing today, my soul's purpose. But like the journey from here to here felt very much like a dark night of the soul.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, it's
about
a
right.
lot. So yeah, I'm a daughter of really driven entrepreneurs. And so much so that a lot of my worthiness, even as a kid, was tied to really making my dad proud and showing him like I worked really hard at this, and I like really like having that be like the fuel, the hit that I got that says, Jessica, you're worthy, right? So I've been hardworking, driven, super, super competitive. So in very masculine energy, and for a lot of my life, very wounded masculine energy for literally as long as I can remember. And there are times as a little girl where I played with Barbies and I had doll houses, but most of the time I was playing with like G.I. Joes and like doing boy things because I had a boy brother who was 13 months older than me. So he was like, yo, if you're going to be cool, like you got to do what I'm going to do, right? So I was very much conditioned into the masculine, and that morphed into wounded masculine. And, it's kind of like, when we talk about like the subconscious and the superconscious mind, it's like sometimes I feel like I give a lot of crap to the subconscious, but it does serve a purpose. So even the traditional way of doing business, which is just really like, it is the grit, it's the grind. Like a lot of times I feel like I talk bad on it, but I also really gained like a lot of traditional business success that way too, right? It does work until I think it doesn't.
Right.
Right? Until you hit this wall. And that's what happened. Like for literally 2 decades, I explored almost every possible business model. I think with this restlessness of like knowing that I had this thirst to align into my soul purpose, I just didn't have clarity about what that was. And so I keep going into the next thing to really like figure that out. And I worked hard at each and every one until I really got to the point where I quit working. I burnt out. My physical and emotional health suffered, like on a really deep level. And you can imagine too, like my husband's an entrepreneur as well. So when you got to me showing up in masculine, him in masculine, a lot of times in wounded masculine energy, because we had done a lot of surface-based personal development. Like we had read all the books, gone to the things, but we never really went into deep healing and deep rewiring and really like the stuff that's needed to connect to abundance and our purpose and awaken intuition, all those sorts of things. So we had two masculine energies like butting heads, and it was to the point where that really suffered, my health suffered, all my other relationships really suffered, and I could no longer like break the financial plateau.
Which financial plateau?
In my business. So like I could get each business to multiple six figures, then they would plateau out. And so this happened over and over again. It happened with, my hair business. It happened with my massage business. And then I had this brick and mortar business, and even our overhead to break even was 50 grand a month. And we would get to a point where it's like multiple six figures, and then we'd flatline. And then the same thing happened in my coaching business. And I'm seriously like, what the fuck is happening, right? I reached this point where like something's got to give. I keep going back into these cycles, these patterns, these, fears and all of this stuff. And so that's really what led me on the journey of doing the deep inner work, really starting to heal some of these patterns that have been a part of me for, maybe possibly many generations.
Your story resonates a bunch with me because there are so many similarities, but there is one difference. Well, I'll start with the similarities. Like I owned a gym for 9 years, and I've been in a bunch of different businesses, and I was able to build multiple six-figure companies, or a series of multiple six-figure companies, but couldn't break through to that other side. And when I was younger, it was heavy masculine. It was very, very systems oriented, but I was really good at like building a culture and in serving my people, right? And then as the pendulum swung to the other side, I did that inner work, and now I'm finding myself, since I've like worked for the past 10 years on the really, really deep inner work stuff, I find myself needing the more masculine systems in order for me to scale. And so it's interesting. Like I wasn't raised at what made my parents proud was not, to run a successful business. And in fact, it frustrated me. And I asked my mom one time, how come you never tell me that like I'm smart or I'm successful or anything? And she's like, all that can be taken away from you. I care, like, how is your relationship with God? How's your relationship with yourself? And how do you treat people? And that's what matters to me. And so like, that's where I sought out my parents' approval, is just like in my character. And I find that often the traumatized or wounded masculine or wounded anything is simply a strength of yours turned a little bit too loud, or just a little bit imbalanced, and then it causes you to observe and realize that you got to swing to the other end to balance you out so you can get to that next level.
Well, I mean, it's total truth, right? One, that's beautiful, like so beautiful, that relationship and that dynamic and that love and how you receive that from your parents. So I just want to like honor that.
Thank you.
And that's too really like how I'm showing up for my boys, and so it's like source is always communicating with us. And a lot of times, unless it gets loud, unless it gets really uncomfortable, we just keep doing what we've got to do, right? So we need that like pattern disrupt. And that's where it gets like way what feels like out of balance, or we have things feel like they're wrong, so to speak, or things are falling apart, or our foundations are crumbling, so that we're uncomfortable, and we can finally get to the point where we're like, okay, something's got to give. Like, so, part of it's conscious shifting out of that and knowing that we can go through this journey, through this hero's journey, right? Instead of pain and suffering, which is what most of us choose. That's why things get so extremely uncomfortable. And instead, of course, shifting into, and this is where I'm really stepping into, is like consciously, like as soon as you, even the slightest bit, feel like things are feeling a little like something's moving here, right? And I get to like lean into this and know that a shift is coming versus making it so uncomfortable and what feels horrible and painful, then shifting, right?
Yeah. So that was my next question. So the rhythmic pendulum swing of like inner work and outer work, as you can also refer to it as, how do you, so it's inevitable that it's going to swing. So how do you prevent, or I shouldn't say prevent, how do you manage, how do you show your clients and the members of your community to manage that so you don't have to go on that like giant roller coaster ride of way too far of like the inner work, where you forget that you actually have a business, or way too hard into the business work where it's like you forget that you're still a human? How do you instruct people to manage that?
I mean, I think it's a super important question. And still, like, I've got to put myself in check with this, because I think that at least what I see in my own self and what I see in my clients, who are all really driven, hardworking entrepreneurs, is that a lot of times we have this like all in mentality. So it's like all in or nothing, right? And so I think that's where it can really, like, we can go all in here, but then this suffers. And then we go back over here, but then this suffers. So really it's this commitment to be fully in tune. Like, our body is the most like amazing spiritual vehicle because it speaks to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, it's always like when I'm starting to get out of balance, it'll subtly show up and my body will speak to me. So it's taking pauses out of the doing to be in the being energy. So it's instead of like the doing of like yang, being in the yang energy, we shift into the yin energy and take a pause to really do like a pulse check and kind of check in at how we're feeling and get to recognize, for me, it's like recognizing how my body's speaking to me and what shows up when I'm out of alignment. So for example, I still slide into wounded masculine, which typically means I'm all in business, right? Like I'm in a growth stretch and I'm like, I've got this thing launching, all of these things that need to be done or that I desire to have done. And so I can, of course, still slip back into that energy, and it'll show up in many different ways. So one, my throat will speak to me, my throat chakra. And it's not because I'm not necessarily, like, it's not like I'm lying. I'm speaking truth in terms of how I'm showing up in full integrity, but I'm not speaking truth to myself per se. So I'll get a sore throat. And by the way, this is the tool and the way my body communicates ever since I was a little girl, to the point where I used to get sore throats all the time. And I really worked through some healing and some trauma growing up. I grew up with a dad who was a sex addict. Both parents traveled all over the world. We had a live-in nanny, and we had a lot of luxury, and then we didn't. And then we had it, and then we didn't. So there was just a lot of patterns and a lot of things to, and by the way, jumping patterns. Like, we had addiction, like really weaving through the family. And so it showed up for drugs for my brother, showed up for sex for my dad. So my throat chakra was always really wanting to speak to me, so much so that I got my tonsils out when I was a teenager because I just kept getting strep throat. And so still today, that's my tool to say, Jessica, we're out of balance. We're out of balance. And that could be in flow too. Like, I think sometimes people think, and I think I say that because I think I used to think this, like, you know, spiritual coaches, they just sit on a beach and they visualize and meditate all day and they just manifest everything into the 3D. And although like we can do some of that, like we have to do like the doing.
Right.
Like we gotta still, so it could be too much over here in divine feminine or too much in the doing of masculine. My throat will tell me I'll get a sore throat. And then also it'll show up in some of the wounded energies. So for me, in my like human design and my blueprinting, it is things like frustration or it's anger. Frustration is usually the thing if I'm getting frustrated or short, and usually it shows up like with the people who I'm most comfortable with,
Right, yeah.
My kids and my husband. So it's just really recognizing our body and the symptoms and how they show up in our energy system, and being able to slow down enough to kind of tune into that and then course correct and be like, and not make yourself feel horrible. Like, Jessica, you know better. Like, you teach this stuff. Why would you get back? It's like, okay, we're all living this human experience and we're going to slide out of
Right.
course, out of balance, and it's totally okay. It's the honoring and not getting stuck there for weeks or months or years, and just course correcting.
So for each individual, it's different, right? So you've got the sensitivity to your throat, and then when that starts acting up, that's how you know that you need to pay attention, recalibrate, and like step inside and say, what is it that I truly need? And so
Yeah.
that's the little warning sign, the little tap on your consciousness to be like, hey, pay attention. You got to pivot a little bit,
Yeah.
right? For me, it was fevers. I had, fevers growing up. I had a condition called periodic fever syndrome where I just like burnt to a crisp every 4 to 6 weeks for the first 30 years of my life. And that's the thing that I use is when I start feeling that the heat, when I start feeling like the body exhaustion that I did, that it's a call to my consciousness. So the very thing that used to haunt me, I actually realized is my check engine light.
Always, right?
Yeah, right.
I
So
love
how do you guide someone through finding what that is for them?
Well, it's usually looking to the place that's like where discomfort shows up. And a lot of times
Mhm.
it's tied, like if you're familiar, even the slightest bit, you could even like pull up an image on Google. And if you connect into the different like energy systems or chakra systems, a lot of times it's going to show up in some sort of like symptom. So for you, it could have been like third eye
Mhm.
associated with the fevers and really intuition wanting to wake up. And for a lot of my clients, it's solar plexus. So it's like gut ache. And like we
Mhm.
think that it's something else, but it's like everything is worth getting really, really curious with.
Okay.
So I was at my local health food store a couple days ago eating lunch with my husband, and we saw one of our old gym clients, and she was like had a whole bundle of vitamins, and she's like, my gut hurts, and like everything I eat is like fighting back, and not to say that there's not something going on with her gut, but it's like everything is worth like looking at it through a different lens. And like I like just being playful, like let me play around with this, let me kind of check into this. So then the first place to look is like where do I feel discomfort? Because we're
Mhm.
really in tune with that. And then maybe you can connect it to the chakra energy system and just really like if you can correlate, for example, like third eye would be intuition, right? So where am I not honoring the nudges that I'm getting? Or like these pops, these thoughts that come up that seem random, where am I second guessing and going with ego, or going with like people pleasing of what the whole like everyone else is doing versus really honoring and trusting what's coming up for me?
Mm.
Where am I not speaking my truth? Or heart center, right? Where am I closing off to love? Where am I not showing love and compassion to myself or to others?
So when you're taking someone through this process and essentially having them become aware of their unique check engine light, is what you've shared so far, based on my understanding, is like where is it in the body relating it to a chakra? Do you also have gauges like emotionally as well? So uh, the the so something like getting depressed or getting anxious or overwhelmed or shutting down, like there are some people get distracted, some people just kind of like shrink and freeze and become avoidant. So do you have a way to or do you take a look at it from that point of view too, to look at like behaviorally and emotionally like what's going on to see where those check engine lights are?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a flesh out of everything. And there's no like right or wrong way, right? So we have like use of all these modalities. You can even just look at like how are people mirroring to me and look at what's showing up and what's triggering us. We can definitely look at like what's coming up emotionally and get curious. Like, I wonder why I'm feeling that way, or what subpersonality part of me is really wanting attention. And so there's so many things that you can move with in terms of triggers, in terms of symptomology, in terms of emotions, in terms of how the world is showing up to you. And so I think the best advice is just to get really curious with everything and start questioning things, not in terms of like judging yourself, But just like, I wonder why, like, that's interesting. That's fascinating. I wonder why that's showing up. I wonder why I'm feeling this way, and just see what comes up. And like, my rule of thumb is always like, when we first start questioning anything that's happening and going on, we're like up in a heady space. So what I find is like, if you take it like a couple layers deep, I think the rule of thumb, right, is like, if you go 7 layers deep and you like question the question and you keep like notching down, you'll get to the truth, and it'll be at a soul level, at a heart level, and you'll know like, okay, this is the answer to the question that I'm asking up here.
Yeah,
Like,
that's awesome. Yeah, that we use in the precise language modality, we call that fractaling. So you start with the question, and you keep fractaling the words down until you see like what the truth is, and then you can go back into the headspace and make the adjustment, right?
yes.
Where like the problem, you're experiencing it up here, but the answer is down here, and then you implement it like through the, you know, the rabbit hole that you went down to get that. One of the things that I see in really what I deem to be effective coaches is that they're able to see duality, you know, of the two sides of everything, and then have the tools to observe and recalibrate, so you can dance the dance between, you know, between all of the polarities of, you know, of the human experience. And so I love what you're sharing, and that's why I think, you know, we resonated a bunch when we had our first and second conversation, is that you really see, you know, both sides of it. And I love that. I love your perspective as well of like, not questioning it, not in a way of judging, but of investigation.
Mhm.
Because when you are curious in investigation, you go down those layers until you see the truth. And so if that's your response to struggle, resistance, pain, a sore throat, a fever, and you get curious and go down, you can then recalibrate so you can get back into alignment and create until you feel the next interference, right?
And I think, you know, like, our whole life is this dance, right? It's being willing to shift from the, like, whether you're a man or a woman, I think we can get hooked into like, we are one thing, but it's like dancing between the masculine and the feminine. It's dancing between the being and the doing. It's dancing between, you know, all parts of us. So yeah, it's total just, it's, I don't, it's a desire. Like, I have this deep desire to step into my wholeness. And I think that's a forever and ever ongoing process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as we upgrade, it's like, we're here, old way of doing things. We start feeling like, ooh, I think things are feeling restless, uncomfortable. I feel momentum coming. I feel a shift coming. So we move into the void. That's where it's like wonky energy. I'm uncomfortable, like shit surfacing from my subconscious. I don't know what to do with it. We go on this journey of intimacy and questioning and that sort of thing. And then we reach the upgrade. So it's like, when we get there, more truth unveil. So we get to work on more stuff, and we get to step into more wholeness, and then we repeat the cycle again. And so
Right.
it's this desire to really want to connect into the truth of who we are, and being willing to continuously do the work, and know that as you do the work, it's like you sharpen your own tools. And so you're not staying in any one place for a long time, and you get to move through these transitions and these shifts and these upgrades faster and faster. And that's what's really exciting. Like, what used to take even a year in inner work is like bridged down to 90 days.
Right.
Like, it blows my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. The collapsing of the timeline as you fractal up into 4D, as like, you know, what you're talking about,
Yeah.
is it's incredible. So how do you suggest that people balance between the surrender of like, when you hear from your guides, your body, your hyperconscious, your subconscious, that you need to make an adjustment, and just being like, I'm going to be a good soldier. I'm going to be a good listener. I'm going to be like, you know, an obedient child, and the conscious creator that has free will and willpower, to say, I'm not going to accept what's going on here. I'm making a decision, and through any resistance, I'm going to fulfill this intent.
Yeah.
So how both are so necessary. And I feel like what's really cool, especially in like today's day and age, and what I'm seeing is it's becoming less of a debate of which way is better and more of an integration of the discernment of when to use each of those sides. So how do you go about guiding someone through that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's so funny because when I like put up the fight, and I'm like, nope, I'm putting my foot down. I know that is like this warrior little girl Jessica inside me. And so there's this sense of honoring her, right? Of like, she did put up the good fight. Like all my childhood, I had really beautiful elements of childhood, but I had really struggling elements and feeling really not feeling love from, you know, my parents, and like intuitively knowing what was actually going on and not being able to speak truth about it. And there's so many elements there. So when she comes up, you know, I'm like, it's a feeling into, and I think this is where intuition is just the most powerful tool. You know, it is our direct channel to source. So intuition is source energy. And so when we do the work, which is really healing, it's healing traumas, it is really having the growth to shift our frequency. And when we're in low frequency, like fear, like worry, knowing that that's pulling every area from relationships to business to health, it's pulling it all down, because how we do one thing is how we do everything. So it's as willing to put in the work, raise our frequency, awaken our intuition, and then trust. So like you can use intuition to unlock more intuition. When you start just trusting, and it can be like super simple things. And I know some people like doing like muscle testing, you know, where you like loop your fingers, and or you can use spiritual tools like crystals and things. But it's being able to trust like the little subtle voice, the feelings, the chills up your arms. And then that's always like my North Star. It's my guider. So that is what will tell me, am I going this way or am I going this way? Is just like, how does it feel in my body? Do I feel expansive? Like, yes, like I've got this. This feels like so beautiful, so illuminating. Or am I feeling contracted and restricted? This is always like a no. And this is, of course, a yes. So it's, again, just taking a pause. And the more you do this, like, it's quick. So now, like, in a shadow of a doubt, I could give you a yes, no question. I could have intuition channeling through. And that's really how I coach. I'm an intuitive life and business coach. So it's all just channeled energy through. And being able to trust whatever comes through, that's the surrender. And knowing there's no right or wrong, ever.
Yeah, I see that people, especially that are more on the spiritual surrender side of the spectrum, or at least that they're operating on that level, they say to me like, well, I don't want to do something unless it feels right. And so when I show them my calendar, and my calendar is just like beautifully stacked and organized, and they're like, this looks like a prison. I'm a slave to my own intentions and to your own commitments. And part of that, I'm like, yeah, you should honor your commitments. And so they take a look at a blank calendar and they say, now this feels good. And I kind of say, like, that's not freedom. That's you being a slave to your emotions. Because like, you'll do what you do when you feel like doing it. But do you feel like there is value in doing something even if you're not truly feeling it, if it's in the direction of your life's purpose? Like, how do you handle that?
Well, I'll give a beautiful example. Like, I woke up today feeling totally like not high vibe Jessica. And I had a full day of strategy calls, of coaching calls, and you're my last call today. And so, yeah, of course, like the feel good side of Jessica would be like, clear the whole schedule. And there's times, like if I'm really sick and working through something, I honor that. But there's also times where you lean in the discomfort and you just trust. I think there's a level of like trust in the timing, that it is divine, and that there's a reason why you're moving through this while you're also moving through this. Mm-hmm. Because I just live under this belief that we're always taken care of and everything is showing up as it should, when it should. So when I woke up today, like I wasn't feeling like a full day of schedule. And like, I really, like I like to wake up like 4:30 or 5. And okay. I went to the drive-in movie theaters with my oldest son last night, and we didn't go home till like 12 o'clock, which is late for him. He's 9. It was late for me. and then I slept in. That never feels good to me. And so I was just all out of sorts. So I think I agree. I have a lot of really spiritual centered clients who can be in that space of like, I just want it all to feel good. And it's really the truth. The truth is that if you're an entrepreneur, like you've got to be willing to go places. You've got to be willing to stretch yourself. You've got to be willing to lean into discomfort. And some things are just necessary for growth. Like it's just bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like where people get stuck a lot is they think they have resistance to the task. So working with a client and they're starting a new offer and you're like, all right, do 2 dozen reach outs and get 5 people on the phone. Right. And then they have massive resistance to this. And they're like, I'm not doing this because I have a lot of resistance to it. And I share with them, I'm like, well, you don't have a resistance when you're doing this. You have resistance to the idea of it. So how about we figure out what that resistance is about after you do it while hating it? You can certainly hate it the entire time, but do it while hating it. And then let's talk about it. I found that when you take that approach, like, I'm not saying this as a lifestyle. I'm saying like step into this one time box and do it even though you don't want to, and see what comes up for you. I had a coach, Matthew Cook, help me like get in better relationship with my body. And we did this yoga meditation. And I felt like, okay, I've got resistance, but in the middle, once you're doing it, you feel awesome. No, not the case. I hated every second of it. Then I had to do it. And he's like, I want you to do it tomorrow. And I'm like, dude, I'm supposed to be loving this. And like thinking about doing this tomorrow makes me want to break my foot on purpose. So I'm not joking. I'm like, if I just fall down the stairs, like maybe like I'll get out of this. So I'm like, this is my resistance. And he's like, great. He's like, bring your pain with you. He's like, cause your body's been like, of course it's mad. You've been ignoring me for so long. So bring your pain with you and then let's talk about it. And it just changed my paradigm of resistance, of discerning between resistance to the idea and the resistance to actually doing it. You might think that they're the same, but the only way to know is to go through it. And I love the thing that you said about trust, because what I'm gathering from your shares is like the inner work is so important because it sensitizes you to the moment, so you don't have to live months or years in an imbalanced pendulum swing. You can feel it for a little bit, trust that there's a message in there for you, and then recalibrate, which I think is absolutely beautiful.
And by the way, too, like sometimes it's actually my full intention to take myself out of balance.
Right. Yeah.
Like, to be like,
it's
okay.
a little bit more advanced, but yes, I know what you're saying.
It's like, okay, we're in a growth stretch. Like, here's what's on deck. And so with the intention of being willing to go to a certain level, to like move through some growth, and then centering myself back up. And I'll do it the same way the other way. Like if I'm taking time off, like holidays is a beautiful example of this. It is my full intention to go completely into more flow states and be more in yin energy of just being, and not be a lot of doing. So I think sometimes we can have the intention, but yeah, it is. It's funny because when you were sharing your yoga example, it reminded me of I had a coach once who, have you ever heard of the meditation Satanyana?
No.
I think it's Satanana or something like that. So she this is when I was like early meditating. It was like my first like beginner course in meditation, and she was really stretching me and wanted me to do this guided meditation. It was only 10 minutes long. And it was, you use your fingers, so it's like sa, ta, na, na, and you go through this sequence, and you start by whispering it, or no, by thinking it, then whispering it, and then you say it, but you do it repetitively over and over and over and over again. And that felt the same way. I was like scissors in my eyes, I can't do this anymore. And so like, it's okay to be comfortable, and I think we have to just really check, like, what's feel good actually mean?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, what's alignment actually mean? Where am I actually using that as like a out?
Right.
To something that's actually going to offer me just a lot of beautiful growth and expansion, because our subconscious is so savvy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it'll show up to be like, I'm on your side. I'm spiritual too. I've got you. But then really it's putting you under the spell of like, and so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just interesting. I think, again, if we circle back to just the intimate questioning, investigating kind of energy of where is this thing coming from? Let's look under the hood and kind of check it out. Then we'll have our answers. And if we take it down and really connect to the heart center of it, we'll know the truth of like, is this true? I don't
Right.
know.
And I feel like the more that you sensitize yourself to it, the better you can plan while doing it. So I right now I'm in a more doing phase of my pendulum swing, and I know that the end of this quarter I'm going to swing back to more of just being, taking more time off, giving myself more space when I create, doing more, focusing more of my attention on inner work, opposed to like business systems and scaling. And so once you get to that point, like you can plan, all right, heavy, like logical, pragmatic thinking swing. And once I'm done with that at the end of the quarter, I'm going to go back more into the kind of like flowy, creative, more space, more listening, as opposed to more like delegating. You know, and I think that the first step to being able to do that is sensitizing yourself and really like knowing those signals that you're talking about, like in your body. That's where it all starts.
Totally. Yeah, it is. Because the strategies and the tactics. Like I've spent over $500,000 on strategies and tactics and marketing and systems and all this stuff, and it's all amazing. But it's like that'll only get you so far until you get to work over here. And that's where we both have the same story of like, and it's over and over again on pattern repeat with entrepreneurs of like plateau, can't work through it, plateau. So what we do when we get here is like we work harder, we grind it out more because we're like, I got this. I can just like hunker down and get to work, and we like get a little bit more out of it. But then it's like we're stuck back here, and then we're burnt out, and we feel like shit, and so we're cycling back in this vicious cycle.
Awesome. Well, before we close out, I want to talk about our not lives, but like the programs, like the little mini courses that we're going to do in the future. So there's two of them that you're going to be doing for our community. I think one of them is going to be in Level Up, and one of them is going to be in the Flow State program. And one is about creating energetic space, correct? And
Yes.
then the other one is dealing with money beliefs. So can you give me like just a quick snippet of what's to come? What we can expect from those?
Yeah. So the number one reason why I know I failed in the past, and a lot of I'm very much like I was very much a personal development hopper. So I would go to thing to thing to thing to thing. And what happens is like we only have so much energetic space and capacity. And so until we actually clear through some energetic space through what I call the law of vacuum. So I think a lot of people are familiar with like the law of attraction. So the law of the vacuum says that in order to really make room for our growth, our success, whatever that is, and prosperity, we have to actually create the space for it. And there's a way that we can do that consciously where we choose what goes out and we choose what gets filled in, or it's this or better. And so it's really moving through this process of creating so much space. It's like your whole body exhales. And then we choose consciously what we're filling that space with, because every space in our being is going to be used up. It's just how the energy works. Yeah. So that's creating energetic space. And then you actually have room to move into the things that you want to move in.
Oh, that's awesome. I cannot wait for that one. All right, tell me about the next one.
So the next one is creating money and allowing success. So what I find so often is that we can want this level of abundance. We can desire more money. But again, when you take it deeper, we've got these deeply rooted money beliefs, stories that have been passed down generations, that we have these beliefs. For me, it was like I couldn't trust money, and money came and it went, and money was dirty. And I had all these beliefs based on my childhood and how I saw money cycle with my parents. We had it and we didn't. We had it and we didn't. And so I had this really toxic relationship with money versus this beautiful and healthy relationship with money. So every time I had the opportunity to bring money in, I was actually repelling it with this underlying toxic relationship. So it's about creating this beautiful, loving, and dynamic relationship with energy. But in order to do that, we look at what is the existing relationship and how do we upgrade that into, it's kind of like if you have, if you're dating, like I think how I used to treat money, if I treated my soulmate that way, like there's no way he would like hang around. He'd be like, yo, like this isn't cool. And so money is just energy. So we get to connect and create a beautiful relationship with it.
Oh, that's going to be awesome, because everyone has some relationship to money that's damaged. It doesn't matter whether you come from lots of money. I have friends and clients that are born into wealth, and then I have other people that are self-made, and that they have, they've earned everything that they've created in terms of money. And everyone has some negative association to money. It's just different based on the experiences that you had growing up. So I'm super excited for that. That's just, when I saw that in your program, it just, flicked a light in my head. And I feel like that would just be universal for, everyone in our community, because money is such an important part of conscious creation. It's dream fuel. It's, it provides the fuel for us to be able to create what it is that we want. And it plays an important role, although it's not everything, it's potential. And so when you build better relationship with it, your creations become more dynamic and profitable, and then your impact gets, bigger as well. So that's awesome. What's that?
Amen to that.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait. I can't wait for the, the future recordings that we do. Tell everyone how they can get a hold of you, how they can join your community, and what those next steps are. We'll drop a link down below for you guys.
Yeah. So really for more on like deep inner growth and like expansion of the things that we're delving into, my Facebook group is Soulfully Abundant Entrepreneurs. And I have this grind audit that is so powerful. So it was completely channeled, downloaded audit. Like I desired a way to be able to test, like, where are you on like a grind scale, which really helps with everything that we're talking about being out of balance. And so you're able to take yourself through, like in 2 minutes or less, this series of questions and connect into and actually have like a report, an audit of where you are on the scale. And then once you know that, it's awareness. And then it's, what's the logical piece of it? What's the how-to? Like, how do I shift out of that? So what I find a lot of times is people are in 60, 70, 80, 90, 100% in the grinds, which is very much a low vibrational way of being. And it's just like attracts like. So you're just attracting more hard, more like struggle, less freedom. And so if we can just shift that, it's huge. So you can have access to that inside the group as well. That's where it lives. And it's just, it's like the tribe of ease and flow.
Awesome. I would be interested in taking a look at that on your grind audit. I think I may have showed this to you, but as you know, I have my beliefs, my frames, everywhere. And on, I believe it was Monday, I wrote this one.
Oh, I love it. It's exactly how I feel. And by the way, I think sometimes it can be like, we've talked a lot about like still putting in the work and being willing to go into the masculine and the doing. I think when you get out of balance, which you'll know in this series of questions, it's when you start to sacrifice, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your health, whether it's your desires. And so it starts to chip away until you're fully in grind mode, and it's like sucking the life out of you. And the next stop is like burnout and overwhelm. And so, I like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the conversation today. I can't wait for our future conversations. And until next time.
Thank you so much.